This is a reading of God's holy word. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are." Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark, but Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. This is the reading of God's holy word. Many years ago, our denomination's General Assembly was held in LA, and I attended that one. And one night during the meeting, there was a sharp disagreement. It was such a sad scene, but at the same time, interesting to watch because that was very rare. We're talking about almost all of them are pastors and missionaries. And they are raising their voice, arguing, shouting at each other, pointing fingers. And some rare scene was happening there. So one regional presbytery filing a complaint against another regional presbytery. So one presbytery consists of several churches, regional. I won't tell you the details, what happened, what was wrong, for the sake of the time, because that is not the main focus. But one pastor from a presbytery A basically had something wrong, broke the rule, and he admitted that it was his fault, and he publicly apologized before all pastors in the presbytery, right? But that presbytery decided to still, even if he apologized all that, still go and do some appropriate discipline on him. And he felt like that's being too harsh, and he's not being heard or taken care of well in that presbytery. So he applied for transfer to another presbytery, and presbytery B just listened to his story and sided with him and accepted his transfer without making any inquiry to that presbytery. So now two presbytery are arguing on the floor, asking all the General Assembly members to settle the matter for them. One was basically saying, since this is not a major moral, ethical failure or scandal, and he repented it, he admitted it, and he publicly apologized, so we should forgive him, we should show him grace and mercy, and just move on, let it go. Since we are Christians, and come on, we got to think about his church. His church need him. But the other party argued, then what is the point of having the church bylaw? If one breaks a church bylaw, and we always say grace, mercy, we got to forgive, grace all the time, then we're never going to do any discipline? What is the point of having the church bylaw? Who's going to take the church bylaw seriously? Who's going to keep it? Now, which one is right? You probably have some between two side that you are more leaning to. When a child does something wrong, one parent goes for mercy. I forgive him. Hey, don't do it again, and gently saying that, and that is it. But the other parents, the spouse goes, No. This time he's got to learn his lesson so that he will never do it again. There has to be some sort of discipline. And which one is right? Both parents love this child. Both parents want the best for him. What are we going to do when we have a disagreement? And when it is hard to say one is clearly right over the other one. There could be a disagreement in a church too, in ministry, in the church ministry philosophy and church direction and on. Now, one may argue that we must spend, and we got to spend more money in mission and mercy ministry. And the other argues, no, that money We should invest to our young people, children, and youth, the next generation, for the future of the church. Which one is right? Can you say that one is right and the other is not? Now, in our text, Paul and Barnabas had a sharp disagreement with one another. Let me take you back to verse 36. Verse 36, it says this, "And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, 'Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are.'" So Paul and Barnabas, at least this one, they came together. Their hearts came together in one accord on this matter. They wanted to revisit those churches they planted in their first mission journey. They want to go back and encourage them. Both had a passion and love for mission. Both loved those churches, Gentile church. Both cared for them. So they agreed on this. Let's revisit them. Good. But here's the problem. Verse 37. "But now Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark. But Paul thought best not to take with them the one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other." So number one, there could be a strong dispute, disagreement, even among genuine Christians, genuine believers. And there is a reason why the Holy Spirit recorded this in the Bible for us here. Not just between any believers. We are talking about right here the two giant leaders in the church history. Wise, godly, spiritual leaders whom we respect so much and held so highly. Paul and Barnabas were pillars in the early church missions. Paul and Barnabas were apostles. This record tells us that there was a sharp disagreement between these two to the point they decided to go in separate ways. And from this moment, we do not see that they went to a mission trip ever again together. Now here we have a word translated as sharp disagreement. In Greek, it's paroxysmos. Now it is very emotionally charged word. It's indignation, deep irritation, and explosive dispute. So I don't know how these two apostles argued, but it was not quiet and gentle discussion. There could be a disagreement, even between very spiritual, godly, and wise people. And it could be really hard to say which one is right. There is no clear right and wrong. Now we are curious then, what was it about? Now we read it. It was about a man named John, also known as Mark, John Mark. Now first, who is John Mark? You probably heard about him multiple times already in this book if you and I, we paid careful attention. He was first introduced Acts chapter 12. Now let me remind you that story. Apostle James was killed by the King Herod there, and Apostle Peter was in prison. So the church gathered, because Apostle Peter was intended to be killed on the following day. The church gathered in the house and they prayed for Peter, and God answered their prayer through an angel in a supernatural way. Peter was released from the prison and led out of the prison. Now, when he came out of the prison on the street, it seems like he knew exactly where to go. He knew exactly in what house the church people have gathered and prayed. So he straight went to that house. He knocked on the door, and a young girl found out that it was Peter, but she forgot, out of joy, to open the door. She went inside and told everybody, Peter is here, and the people inside did not believe her word. Remember that story? That house was John Mark's house. Let me take you to that. Acts chapter 12, verse 12. When Peter realizes that he's outside of the prison, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark. where many were gathered together and were praying. John Mark's mother was Mary. The fact that Peter already knew where to go as soon as he came out of the prison tells us that John Mark's house was used by the early church as a regularly gathering place. So Peter knew, okay, they probably there. I got to go there. See what I'm saying? This speaks in volume the wealth and the prestige of this family. And not only that, we can assume that this family had a critical role in the early church, almost like a founding member, leading family, influential. The church gathered their house frequently. And John Mark was very well known by Peter and very well known by many early church believers. He was very well known by Barnabas and Paul both too. In the same chapter, verse 25, chapter 12, verse 25 says this, "And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had completed their service, bringing with them John, whose other name was Mark." So Barnabas and Paul was sent from Antioch to help Jerusalem church, and after they finished their work, they took this guy, John Mark, "Hey, you come with us." And they took him to Antioch. It tells us that John Mark was approved man by Paul and Barnabas at this time. Paul and Barnabas is like, "John Mark, good guy, you join us. Follow us. Let's go." And John Mark actually joined their first mission trip as a part of the mission team. And chapter 13 tells us that. And for some reason that we do not know, in the middle of the mission trip, and we don't know why, because the Bible is silent about it. But in the middle of the trip, he basically quit. He left and returned to Jerusalem, his hometown. It seems like both Paul and Barnabas had a very high hopes on him. Maybe to be the next leading figure in the church, early church, for the kingdom. But that incident was a huge letdown. Possibly, the way he left wasn't good. And most certainly, his departure has some sort of negative impacts on their first mission ministry. So Paul made up his mind, and he's very firm about it. This time, he's not going with us, period. But Barnabas kept insisting that we must take him. No, we got to give him another chance. According to Colossians chapter 4, verse 10, it tells us that John Mark was Barnabas' cousin. Our English ESV Bible translate the word as a cousin, and other translations, other Bible also say they translating the Greek word as a nephew. So possibly one of those two, either cousin or nephew of Barnabas. We don't know each one exactly, but definitely he was blood related to Barnabas. Now, is this the reason why Barnabas is so strongly insisting that we must take John Mark because he's relatives? To the point that he even willing to be split up with Paul. That's huge things. I'm going to explain soon, but Barnabas and Paul's relationship was really tight. Now, who is Barnabas? Let me remind you about this person. Barnabas' real name is Joseph. He was known as Barnabas by many early church believers because the Barnabas, the meaning of that is a son of encouragement. And really that was his gift and his heart. He was indeed a man of encouragement. In early Acts chapter 4, very early period of the church, when the church was in need, this is the man Barnabas who sold his land. He sold his land and brought them money and laid down before the apostles and gave to the church as an offering to meet the need of the church. Here is a man who really cared for others. Barnabas saw the contribution of John Mark's family made for the church, their reading role and their influence in the early church, and the potential of this young man, John Mark. And he really believed it is right to give him grace and mercy and lead him and help him to grow mature, to be a better minister. Though he showed some immaturity previously, let's help him. Barnabas had that kind of heart. Barnabas was a church leader, very respected church leader in the early time. Now, Paul, if you remember, Paul was a notorious persecutor of the church. When Paul became a Christian, a lot of early church believers, including their leaders, did not trust that Paul became a Christian. They were so afraid of Paul. They were thinking, maybe Paul's conversion is not really authentic. He's faking. He's faking that he's a believer to get more Christians and persecute them. So they did not want to even meet with Paul. They didn't want to accept Paul into their midst. They didn't want to do that. Nobody except this man, Barnabas. Barnabas was the one who trusted Paul and who defended Paul, gave a chance to Saul at this time. Listen to him once. He really became a believer now. He's the one who brought Paul, to the church. Barnabas was the only guy who defended Saul, trusted Saul, and helped him. Barnabas always had that kind of heart. He wanted to encourage such people. Between Paul and Barnabas, initially, Barnabas was the leader. It was him who got commissioned by the Jerusalem church. Hey, we heard this news about the Antioch. Barnabas, can you go check it out? And Barnabas went to the Antioch, and Barnabas was the one who led the Antioch church. And Barnabas was the one, if you remember, went to the city called Tarsus while Paul was there. And Barnabas, because he recognized Paul's deep understanding, knowledge of Bible and theology, and his gift of teaching, Barnabas went to Paul to Tarsus. Paul, join me. Let's go to Antioch church, and you can teach there. Paul was scouted by Barnabas, and he joined the ministry because of Barnabas. Barnabas is the one who recognized Paul's talents and gifts, his passion. And for that reason, in their first mission trip, Barnabas recognized Paul's apostleship and his gift of teaching and preaching. Barnabas yielded the leadership to Paul. Paul, you become the leader between you and me. You do it. You speak, you lead, you address to the people, you. So instead of, in the beginning, it was Barnabas and Paul. Later, soon it become Paul and Barnabas, Paul and his team, Paul and his companion. Barnabas was that kind of person. He was Paul's best friend. They were comrades who fight through all kinds of trials and hardships during the first mission trip. Let me remind you another thing. Remember in the city of Lystra, Paul was stoned and almost died. Who was there next to Paul? Who helped him? Who encouraged him? Barnabas. They went through a lot together for years. The friendship they had between the two. This is a reason why this is really heartbreaking, that they are about to split up from each other. But Barnabas' will was very strong. We must show Mark grace and mercy. Another chance. We gotta take him. This will equip him for the future church, for the ministry as well. No. I will not go with John Mark. He's not coming with us. It is best not to take him. Paul came back strong. Do you think Paul is being a little too harsh here? As a former persecutor of the church, he himself received the mercy and grace and became what he is today. Come on, show him some grace. Yes, John Mark failed. But can you show him some mercy? Is that how we feel? Why is he like this? Now, verse 38 says, Paul thought that it's best, it's good not to take him. Not taking him is good, best. Now, hold on, best for who? Best for John Mark or best for Paul himself? Best for what? Now, in his view, we are just servants. I believe what really matters for him is that the mission is about the eternal life of many Gentile people. This is not about them. They should more care about the ministry of saving lives. And Paul felt he could not take any risk related to that. Now, in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and also in the letter of Titus, Paul gave a list of qualifications for what leaders should be like, including elders and deacons. And Paul felt very strong about it. For leaders, Paul wanted to hold them in different standard in those qualifications. I want you to think with me. I have heard this before. Someone saying to me, now if he or she becomes a leader, it could be elder, deacon, or small leader, or whatever the leader could be. All right? If he becomes a leader, he will do better because then he will feel the responsibility. Then because of that, he probably will step up more. Like, oh, I'm now with that, so I'm going to do better. So that's going to make him to be a better leader. So let him be. So which one? Should we put someone who is qualified already, examined and proven person to a leading position, or someone who is somewhat close enough with hope that he or she would step up if we put them in the position? Which one? Firing somebody is always not easy. It's not easy on the person who got fired, but also the one who needs to let him go. It's not easy. I had to let go a person once before in the past. Now, when you see a young intern pastor or director of a department, and let's just say, if the person is not really helping the ministry but hurting the ministry, what would you do? How many chances should I give to that person? Should I continue with that person for the purpose of training and equipping that person to be a mature leader for the future? Or should I let the person go to protect the ministry right now? Letting a person go in a church is not always due to the incompetency of that person. Sometimes I have to do that because now the church has a different need. Like we needed somebody hired, but with given money, limited resource, we cannot hire all these kind of people and let this person go hire different role person. That can happen too. But a ministry incompetency, and we let the person go. But the ministry incompetency does not mean that the person is incompetent. Because there could be a serious mismatch. Like someone, let's say, who is really gifted with adults and have heart and passion for young people or adults, is put it in the children ministry. There's a serious mismatch. A person who is really gifted in administration is always called to teach, preach, teach. That's a mismatch. And the person is not going to do well in that ministry. And people will say, hey, ministry is not going well. It's not necessarily because the person is a terrible, incompetent person, but because there is a serious bad mismatch. So if we need to let the person go, is it too harsh? Should we just continue to give grace so the person may develop better? Or do we need to seek the better ministry right now? Which one? I have heard different things too. And I have heard different opinions on this matter. Let's say, not only incompetency, but let's say pastor has a moral failure, such as extorting money from church or having an inappropriate, scandalous relationship with a woman. Let's just say that. Now, some people say that he should never be brought back to the ministry ever again. Others say, no, if he really repents, he should have a long period of time of restoration, and after period, he can come back to ministry with some sort of accountability system. Now, which one is right? Now, even with the latter opinion, how long is the enough time of restoration? to ever even come back to ministry. Paul surely held John Mark in that missionary standard, or I should say pastoral standard. And what John Mark did last time, he, as a fellow worker, we promised to go to work together, and he quit on that. He did what a missionary should not have done. He cannot go with us this time. No. Paul was firm. The disagreement was so sharp, became so emotional. But we don't see they became enemies against each other. There was no slanders. There's no hint of personal text here. I'll show you a little later today's message, but in later letters of Paul, Paul expressed such love and care for this man, John Mark, even after this. When there is a disagreement among believers, do not be arrogant, do not be haughty, respect one another, and respect your leaders. The other person loves the Lord too. The other person gave a deep thought into that too. The other person also have a good reason for that. And seeking the best for the church as well. You are not the only one. 1 Peter 3:8, finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy and brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. I really pray that there may be no division in this church. I really, really pray for that. That has been my biggest prayer since day one of this church, since the church plan of Hope of Glory. But whatever you have humble attitude. And I ask you to trust your leaders. Number 2, sovereign triumph of God. And I really want you to pick up this one today as well. Even with this treasury, this was used by God. Even their disagreement and splitting up from each other served God's sovereign purpose and plan. So because of this, two mission teams were formed. The mission for the Gentile became multiplied. These 2 mission teams go to 2 different regions, 2 different people groups now. Team Barnabas went to the island of Cyprus. Team Paul went to the inner city of Galatia, and they ended up going all the way to Greece, Macedonia, and Achaia. This turned out to be better, beneficial actually for the church, Gentile churches. Both were going to different regions and strengthening the churches. Additionally, because of this, as its result, 2 more leaders were born. Barnabas took John Mark under his wing, and Paul went and chose this person named Silas and took him under his wing. And both John Mark and Silas became very important figures in the next generation of the church. And right after this, when we go to chapter 16, verse 1 through 3, we see another man, Timothy, joining the team too. It is really sad and troubling to watch the dispute, considering what kind of relationship they had for a long time. But God turned it around, used it for good. People argue. People split. We hear news and stories about how people or church, for the good reason or bad reason, divided and split. Even over that, God triumphs over our breakups, and His work never stopped by us. Number 3, a long run. I should do it longer. Long run. Who is qualified for such task? Are you competent for the work that God has given to you in your life? Who is competent for the call that we received in Him? Anybody who did not fail? Can you imagine John Mark listening to their dispute over him? How would you feel if you were there and these 2 leaders are arguing over you? And I tell you this, I greatly respect Mark for that. Because he neither took this as a personal attack on him, nor he got grudges or hatreds against Paul. Paul's word humbled him. Barnabas' word encouraged him. He knows that he failed before. He knows that he's incompetent. His reputation is at the bottom. But John Mark did not run away nor quit ministry. John Mark did not hold grudges against Paul. Even after this incident, we see John Mark followed Paul, served him, helped him, and learned from Paul. He took this as a motivation, and he tried to be a useful servant. He knows that he's not up there yet, so he took it, and he saw this. So, okay, I gotta run though. Very long run. Right now, it's not everything. Long race to be a proven servant of the Lord. And that takes time, my brothers and sisters. Now, how do I know all this? Because of what Paul wrote about John Mark in his later epistle letters. Let me tell you a few of it. Colossians 4:10. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greet you, and Mark, the cousin or nephew of Barnabas, concerning whom you have received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. Paul definitely had a care for John Mark. Please welcome him. Take care of him. 2 Timothy 4:11. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark. Bring him with you to me. Why? Why? Because he is very useful to me for ministry. Do you see that? Philemon 24. And so do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke, my fellow workers. You see? From, hey, it is not best to take him. He's not coming with me. From that to, he is very useful to me for my ministry. He is my fellow worker. From that to that. Your past failures and your present incompetency is not the final definition of you. That is not everything. You got to see in a long run. Because God works throughout your life, molding you and shaping you. And Jesus redeems, picks up these incompetent people for His glory. So we must stay humble, strive for the excellency and faithfulness, relying on our Redeemer. He redeems our lives. Useless to be useful. This is John Mark, whom Jesus used to write the very first book of the New Testament. One of the four Gospels, the Gospel of Mark. He is the author of the Gospel of Mark. Do you see how Jesus turned this man around and used him for His glory? Peter knew this man. And 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13, Peter says, Mark is my son. At some point, John Mark stayed with Peter, and he wrote down every testimony of Peter about Jesus, and that becomes the Gospel of Mark, the first Gospel, the first book of the entire New Testament. Basically, Gospel of Mark is Gospel according to Peter. John Mark's vocation, his gift, his competency shined brightly in that area. God uses His people. See it in the long run. Let's pray.